When someone is diagnosed with Hashimoto's, one of the first pieces of advice that they often hear is to try to go gluten free. And most of us don't like that advice. I have done several different episodes about gluten free because some people say, some research says that about 80% of people feel better on a gluten-free diet. But then we start looking for loopholes. Like, what about freshly milled flour? Can you tolerate freshly milled flour and gluten in that if you have Hashimoto's? That's what we're talking about today. And spoiler, for some people, yes, some people, no. Welcome to the Health with Hashimoto's podcast. This is where you will find clarity and simple, sustainable strategies to feel better. I want to help you figure out your root causes. My name is Esther. I am a registered nurse. I know how exhausting it is to live with fatigue, brain fog, and the ups and downs of Hashimoto's. And that is why I'm here. I'm here to cut through the confusion and to give you practical steps that support your body, calm your immune system, so that you can regain your energy and feel like yourself again. Freshly milled flour is exactly what it sounds like. It is flour that has been freshly milled from the wheat berry or from the grain. It might not necessarily be wheat flour, it might be a different kind of flour. The biggest benefits come because it's the whole part of the grain. So this includes the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. It's rich in minerals, rich in vitamins, rich in fiber. A lot of this stuff has been processed out of what in my house we now call dead flour. Flour that is shelf stable that you would just get at the grocery store, all-purpose flour, bread flour, whatever kind of flour it is. It's been processed. If it is called whole wheat flour, it's still missing, I believe it's the germ that it's missing. It has the bran added back in, but it is still missing part of the goodness that comes from the whole grain. So when people mill that flour and then use it within like a couple days, you get so much more nutrients, more nutrient value from that. Another benefit of using freshly milled flour is because you have more control over the source of your grain. So you can choose the distributor, obviously, where you're buying it from, and you can choose, are you going to get heritage wheat? Heritage wheat is typically, all of this is typical. I don't think there's any like hard and fast definitions for each of these, but heritage wheat is typically pre like 1950s, before wheat started being more modernized. Obviously, it's been like going through generations of change since, I don't know, Egyptian times, but heritage wheat is usually referred to, at least I've seen it, as like pre-1950s wheat. Obviously, it's not GMO. And then you can also get other different types of wheat grains. On my buckets of wheat berries, I have a family tree that lists how old things are. The most ancient of grain of wheat that we have is einkorn. Einkorn is pretty weird to bake with. When I first saw that in the Facebook groups, I'm like, it's still wheat. How can it be weird to bake with? If you've ever baked bread with regular flour, you know that you put the flour in, you put your yeast in, you let it proof, you let it rise, and then you punch it down, you knead it, and you let it rise again. There's always 2 rises. If you're making einkorn, then it doesn't like to have a second rise. It's very finicky. It doesn't have the same gluten as modern wheat does. And when I made my sourdough einkorn yesterday, it was almost like a thick cake batter when I poured it into the loaf pan. There was absolutely no kneading, just mixing. And then I let it rise once and put it right into the oven. It was perfect sandwich loaf sourdough bread. So good. And einkorn has been really hard to figure out a good sandwich loaf, so I was so proud of that one. But that's the most ancient wheat, and then there's a lot of different varieties in between einkorn and today's modern wheat, or even the heritage wheat. There's red wheat, there's white wheat, there's spelt, there's emmer, and there's a whole bunch of non-wheat grains that you can also mill. So some of the benefits, like I said, you get the whole grain in your flour, and you also get to choose where your grain or what kind of grain you're going to use. And if you want it organic, if you want it heritage, if you want it from out of the country, all of these different things, you have more control over that. So there are benefits for freshly milled flour. There are also some downsides because you're getting the entire grain. You have more bran, and bran is sharp. And so if you're used to baking a lot, especially bread, some people find that the more they knead their freshly milled flour, the more that bran acts as little tiny knives and will cut apart the gluten. So even if you have like a red wheat or a white wheat, which are more like the modern all-purpose flours, some people find that they have less gluten developed just because the bran is cutting up the gluten. And you can find a lot of YouTube videos and different things on that if you're wondering. I am part of several different freshly milled flour Facebook groups. And for today, I did some research on, molecular mimicry for gluten. Is that a thing or isn't that a thing? And then I also looked in the groups so that I could give you a lot of firsthand, or I guess secondhand experience. If you have Hashimoto's, can you tolerate freshly milled flour products? Now, this was first brought to my attention when I watched an interview with Sue Becker. Her website and everything is, I think, Becker's Bread. And she talks about how she has Hashimoto's and she can do freshly milled flour. And she's seen a lot of people turn around their health. She has a lot of firsthand experience watching people's lives change. She also said that I think she said she has a science background and she doesn't believe in the gluten molecular mimicry theory. So that was one of the first things I looked at in preparation for this podcast episode. Is that a thing? And there's not a ton of evidence. Like, we can't say definitively yes, but there's more evidence yes than there is no. So I can see how she gets that wiggle room in order to say it. But overall, yes, a lot of the research and a lot of the experts do point to that there is molecular mimicry for gluten and thyroid. One research paper said that is molecular mimicry between the gut and thyroid tissue transglutaminase. But honestly, I don't think most of us care about the molecular aspect of gluten. We just want to know, can we eat regular food? Can we eat wheat if it's freshly milled? Can we find a loophole so we can eat regular things again? At least that's what I'm looking for. That's what I've heard from different clients. So let me tell you from the Facebook groups. Like I said, I'm in several different freshly milled flour ones. I'm in some gluten-free freshly milled. I'm in some regular. And overall, it's yes and no. And that's how it goes for so many things. You are a bio-individual. You are a unique person. Your gut is different than anybody else's gut. Your history and all of the things that go into your current health, it's unique to you. So it is your job, your privilege, and your job as somebody with Hashimoto's to figure out what works for you. What are your unique root causes? What is your mix? And if you have not yet been through my root causes revealed mini course, it's going to take you less than an hour to figure out most of your root causes, at least based on common sense. Of course, you can always do testing, but in less than an hour, I'm going to help you figure that out because you are a unique individual. So let's find out what some unique individuals have had to say. The first post that I'm going to talk about is basically, have you seen your health change since switching to freshly milled flour? This is for everybody. This is not just for people with thyroid problems, autoimmune problems, or Hashimoto's. This is, have you seen your health change or your family's health change? The poster says, don't get me wrong, I know it's better for me and my family, and I've actually grown to love the taste and love making bread. I just haven't noticed any real differences. I still feel like I'm bloated. I might feel fuller longer, but nothing like the testimonials talk about from the Beckers. And you will notice in the freshly milled community, there's a lot of references to Sue Becker and things that she says because she is one of the leading voices on it. And a lot of people do agree with her and a lot of people don't agree with her. So one response to this post says, I am pre-diabetic. The last 3 weeks, I have eaten all of my flour fresh milled, and my blood sugar has been in the normal range. And she also said that she has worn a continuous glucose monitor for a year. So she does have a really good baseline of what works for her and not. Another person said that changes were more subtle, but after 7 years of being pregnant and or breastfeeding, she was exhausted all the time. And she did start feeling better after eating some freshly milled wheat. Now, I want to go back to the research, and one said that a lot of people who are on a gluten-free diet consume an inadequate amount of vitamins B and C, folates, iron, zinc, and magnesium. And freshly milled wheat or freshly milled grain is higher in the B vitamins, and it's higher in a lot of the other vitamins and minerals. So one reason that people hypothesize that people feel better when they're eating freshly milled grains is because they're getting more nutrients. If you are already taking a really good multivitamin because you know you have gaps in your diet, you might have already filled these gaps, and so you might not feel a difference when you switch to freshly milled grain. I have noticed that commonality when I am talking to people personally. I have not seen that on the Facebook groups. Like, I'm not going into every comment and saying, "Oh, if you felt a huge change when you started eating freshly milled grain, can I ask, were you taking a really good multivitamin to fill in the gaps in your diet?" I'm not going there. You know, I'm not going to take over somebody's post to do some multivitamin research on that. But this person, Brenda, said, "I think a lot depends on your eating or health habits before starting freshly milled flour. I've been doing it for quite a while, but I was eating very healthy and exercising before I started. I've been pretty healthy my whole life. I'll never go back, though, because I know the health benefits, and I believe, even though I didn't notice any big improvements and I didn't have much health-wise that needed improving, and I wanted to stay that way." Another person said, "I've been milling my flour for about a year. I have not seen any great changes, but I do find that I have better bowel movements." Another person said, "My gut is so much more regular. One week I couldn't make bread, and my gut churned the whole week." That is a common thread through a lot of people in the freshly milled flour community. They say that their bowel movements and their gut is much different. A couple other comments on this specific thread. Basically, no, you're not the only one. As much as I love it, I have not seen any tangible results either. Somebody said that their skin is better. Somebody else said that acne is better. Overall, I think the general theme, although again, every single person is individual, but the general theme is I haven't noticed a lot of changes, but I do enjoy knowing that it's better for me. And that is freshly milled flour in general. But what about if you have Hashimoto's? To recap my story, when I had my youngest son, who is now 12, I had to go on a huge elimination diet because of some problems that he was having. When I, added foods back in, I found out that I was no longer tolerant to gluten. It really amped up my migraines. It really lowered my migraine threshold, and I had other problems with it too. So it's been, like I said, about 12 years. I've gone off and on it, tried it different times. Every time I felt worse and worse on it. And then when COVID happened, I tried long fermented sourdough and was very hopeful. I had some bread, and within like an hour, I was just super, super depressed, which was so unusual for me. And finally, I was like, oh, this is the gluten. After listening to the episode with Sue Becker, I tried Heritage Wheat freshly milled sourdough, and I was very hopeful and again could not tolerate it. I could tolerate it better. I wasn't really depressed, but I had brain fog. I just didn't feel like myself. I put some of my podcast episodes on YouTube. I don't really talk about YouTube. I don't really work YouTube very much, but that specific video is on YouTube, and I have had so many people saying, "Oh, that was just a detox reaction." So I guess you have to know what is a detox reaction and what is an autoimmune flare. For me, it was not a detox reaction. People might want to say that. I don't want to let my body get used to being sick again. I don't want to get used to those symptoms and just say, "Oh, this is how it is." I know what my body feels like off of gluten, and I know what happens when I have an autoimmune flare. And for me, having Heritage wheat that was red wheat or white wheat, it sent my autoimmune condition up a little bit with the brain fog and not feeling like myself, the decreased energy. That's not a detox reaction. That's my body saying, hey, whispering, what's going on, I want to catch those whispers before my body has to start yelling. So, to all of those people who are like, "Yeah, no, that's just a detox reaction," I'm gonna fight back and say that was not a detox reaction. That was my body telling me, communicating with me what was going on. So, since then, I found out that there are even more ancient grains, and I now can use the most ancient, which is einkorn. I have gone up that family tree, or I guess down that family tree, a couple rungs on that ladder, and I can't do that. My body tells me no. So for me, I can do einkorn, especially if it's sourdough fermented. Can do it fresh as well, but I have noticed that it's better for me. My body appreciates it more if it is sourdough. So that's my story, but what about other people? Again, these are stories, testimonials from the Facebook groups that I'm on. One person said that she has Hashimoto's, and when she went gluten and dairy-free, her inflammation dropped. She no longer had joint pain. Her antibodies decreased by about 50% for the first time ever. And when she uses freshly milled gluten-free grains, then she can still do all of the freshly milled stuff, but continues to get the benefits from gluten-free. Somebody else echoes something that we've talked about a lot on the podcast. She said, "My experience is that some gut healing has to take place first. Once that happens, slowly introducing freshly milled flour can bring a benefit. But every person is different. Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disease, and the immune system is attacking the body. We have to heal the gut." She goes on to say, if you just start having freshly milled flour, but you have a broken immune system and gut problems, it might not help. Another person said, "I think this is just people trying to sell their opinion wrapped as truth. They may even believe what they're saying, but there's no hard and fast rule for thyroid or Hashimoto's issues." Absolutely. You are an individual. Unfortunately, there is no 100% yes, 100% no on this issue. You really have to figure out what works for you. And like the other person said about the gut, you really do have to tend to your gut health first. We do know that gluten and zonulin talk directly. Gluten tends to think of zonulin as like the remote control that opens the gate of a castle. Like, back medieval times when they had the gates, they would lower them and close them, lower them and open them. Zonulin is like the remote control that tells it to open, and gluten pushes that button. So if you want leaky gut, if you want all of the gates to open and everything to go through, gluten is going to do that. And so we have to figure out, how to have really good gut health. And that's one thing that I worked on really hard over the last year before I tried gluten this last time in the form of, the most ancient wheats. Another person about this Hashimoto's, she said she is on thyroid medications. She has been using freshly milled flour, and everything is fine, having no problems for 2 years. All of her numbers have actually dropped drastically. Another person said that her daughter has Hashimoto's, and she can eat some freshly milled items in moderation, and it does not affect her. But she did have to go gluten-free for a while. Somebody else said that her husband still gets headaches from freshly milled einkorn sourdough. So like I said, einkorn is the most ancient wheat that is available, and this person uses sourdough and it still cannot tolerate it. You really have to figure out what is going to work for you. Somebody else said, "The only way to know is to try it. We are different." And that is where I'm going to leave this episode, because that is really the only answer. Yes, absolutely work on your gut health. Gut health is crucial. It is one of the main root causes of all autoimmune conditions. I have a bunch of episodes about gut because of this, because it is such a root cause. I will put probably 5 or 6 of the episodes down in the show notes. But if you only have time for a couple, look to episode 178, which is the gut thyroid connection. And there I'm talking about specifically things I learned from the book Super Gut. And then also 184, which is how to improve gut health without overwhelm. So 178 and 184 would be where I would start if you want 2 episodes about gut health. But essentially, work on your gut, heal the gut, and then experiment. See what works for you. Keep a good food log, a good diary of I tried this food. Make sure that you're logging your brain fog symptoms, your energy symptoms, your gut symptoms, and then keep that log for probably at least 3 days so that you get a good picture of what different foods do when you eat them, and experiment. The only way you're going to know what works for you is by trying and experimenting what works for you. There's no hard and fast rule. As much as everybody wants me to say, there's a loophole to the gluten thing, and if you use freshly milled flour, there's your loophole. Well, I can't say that because it's not accurate. It might work for some people, but it doesn't work for everybody. And the only way you're going to know if it works for you is to try it. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. Please discuss any changes with your trusted healthcare provider. To take your next step, join our school community and explore the courses available there. You do not have to figure your health out alone. So that is school, SKOOL.com, and it is the Health with Hashimoto's community. I'll see you next time on the Health with Hashimoto's podcast.